critically acclaimed National Book Long List. Hope everyone saw that. Our author, Angela Flournoy, is here to celebrate the release of her novel, The Wilderness. If you have not had a chance to read it, you are in for a treat. Female friendship, yes, all its deep, glorious, wonderful complexity. So enjoy. Thank you, Angela. Flournoy's first book, The Turner House, was shortlisted for the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize in 2015. So it's fun to have sort of seen her talent on the early side, and makes it particularly special to have her back to discuss The Wilderness tonight. And Angela is joined on stage with two of my favorites, New York Times bestselling author Brit Bennett. I think I've hand-sold 100 copies of The Vanishing Half, so that's another one. Grab that. And then the luminous Raven Leilani, winner of the 2020 First Novel Prize for her debut novel, Luster. So without further ado, I am eager to present our speakers. Join me in welcoming Angela, Brit, Raven. Come on stage.
Hi. It's so lovely to be here with all of you and with my friends, Raven and Brit. I think I'm going to read just a little bit. I know there will be some feedback that I am not reading enough, but it's going to be enough because I'm just really excited to talk with Brit and Raven, and I also don't want to spoil anything. Thank you all for coming. Just so many familiar faces here. I won't get too emotional, but it just reminds me of beautiful community that I've been a part of over the years in New York, and even some faces all the way from Harlem. God bless you. Yes, I'm just really happy to be here with all of you. And before I forget, I also wanted to say thank you to some key people, including my husband. Not going to say his name, but my agent, Ellen Levine, my editor, Rikia Clark, my marketing genius, Deanna. I can't remember your last name all of a sudden. Bailey, oh my gosh. It's the lights, and everyone else from Mariner who's really made this just a lovely experience putting this book out. So I'm going to read a little New York bit, the first New York bit in the book. No, chronologically the first New York bit. Flying over Manhattan at night, the lights in Times Square blink and flash like an electric toy, a Technicolor music box, a dance revolution simulation. Colorful, kinetic, tiny and outsized at once, beseeching. A cloud passes over Midtown and the island becomes a black and yellow twinkling geode, which makes more sense. City of outstretched, scaffolded arms, city of 2 million pulsing lights, a socket for every plug, one would assume. Desiree turned on her phone just before the plane touched down. She texted, "Doors open at 10, but get there by 11:30. Give my name. Come cute, but not too cute to dance." She felt ridiculous, like a party promoter spamming folks to meet a quota. Then she felt giddy. She had never hosted a party for herself. The number that had been thrown for her at any age wouldn't add up to 5. The brownstone on 123rd and Lenox had been chopped into 6 units, who knows when. A package blocked Desiree's path to the door, a box from LA addressed to Nakia. Inside the apartment, finding Nakia in the shower, water running and Sade blasting, Desiree used her keys to open the box. She rarely got packages herself, and Nakia never seemed to mind when Desiree opened one of hers. Nakia's mother, Juanita, was the kind of person who sent cards for birthdays with carefully considered messages and generous checks in them. She listened when her daughter complained about not having a thing, then the thing often showed up. On top of this, she sent spontaneous care packages. This one, warm fuzzy socks, good corn tortillas, Tony Chachere's Creole seasoning, Mother's sandwich cookies, chocolates from See's Candies, 5 lemons no doubt picked from her own tree, a bag of dried red chilies, and 2 jumbo cans of red enchilada sauce. The sight of these treasures, love offerings from the other coast, made Desiree's nose sting. She and Nakia lived on the top floor in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom unit. The trade-off of not sharing a bathroom was having no real living room, just a wide hallway between them that served as a kitchen and common space. There was no room for a sofa, but they bought a tiny secondhand cafe table and 2 chairs so that they could eat or chat when one of them cooked, which turned out to be optimistic because Nakia mostly ate at her restaurant and Desiree hated eating alone in the apartment. She put the package on the table and scanned the counter for mouse droppings. She saw none, which meant that maybe the super's poison had finally worked. Or maybe the mouse had found a new favorite part of the apartment. Or maybe Nakia had wiped down the counter recently. Probably not. Some of the apartment's walls were thick and some felt temporary. In Desiree's bedroom, you could hear every laugh and grunt on the other side. Right now, she thought she could hear the squeaks of sneakers on hardwood from a basketball game on TV next door, or else a multi-mouse fuckfest within the walls that was better left not visualized. A buzzer sounded, confirming the former. Every bit of furniture she owned had been acquired within 3 hours thanks to Craigslist. A full-size bed with a wrought iron bed frame, 2 rickety IKEA dressers spray-painted green, a wooden 3-legged round table, a floor lamp with a crinkly crepe paper shade, a small circular gray rug. She liked knowing that all these things could be left behind without much hand-wringing, or tossed into a van and hustled away within minutes. A collapsible life, finally formed, mirrored feeling. I'll stop there. Thank you.
So one of the things that's immediately apparent when you're reading this book is your gift for rendering sense of place. That description of the city as a sparkling geode is something I remember the first time I read through it. But that scene prefaces a really beautiful and perfect club and party scene, which are my favorite scenes in books for their sort of kinetic energy, and you capture that beautifully in the book. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I feel like there are people here of a certain age. How many of you all remember the club? Right? Like, I don't know if the club exists. Does it exist still, like the way that it existed? For me, when I was thinking about the passage of time, like this 20-year span, one of the things that I was thinking about was how much of my early friendships, the spaces that they were actually like formed in. A friend of mine, the actress Issa Rae, was on a podcast recently, and she talked about how the two of us only knew each other from the club, brunch, and dinner circuit. Like, we didn't know that we both had like these aspirations, like creative aspirations, for a very long time, because it's like we were in the club. But we spent hours together, but they were hours like enjoying music and sweating and like also protecting each other, because you got to do that in the club too, like making sure somebody wasn't like going home with somebody they didn't want to go home to, or being sort of pushed up on by somebody they did not want to be pushed up on. So it's like there's real negotiations and care that happens in the club, but you're not necessarily discussing, unless you're that kind of person at a certain hour, like your deepest, darkest fears and anxieties. And I wanted to explore that, and sort of over the passage of time, these people who they really kind of do only know each other like within that circuit become so much more.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. Okay, so along those lines, I think one thing that I've been saying to people about this book that I really love so much is the way that it renders friendship is in a way that I think is more realistic than often friend groups are represented, because they're like, I often think friend groups are kind of flattened, where it's like everyone is equally close to each other and they know each other. But if you've been in a friend group, you know that that's not true. You know that there are like these two people who are closer than these people. These people never hang out with that third person, but the fourth person is there, maybe they do. There's a way that all of the characters, they know each other in these different contexts. So I was thinking about this in the context of the Turner House. I'm like, Angela is really great at representing large casts and large groups of people in a way that is really complex. So I'm just curious how you set about thinking about the friend group at the center of this book and those micro relationships and rendering them in a way that to me felt really authentic.
When I think about characters, I really think about like a web of characters. Sometimes I wish that I did not, right? Because it's more work.
Yeah, it is.
The next book I don't think is going to be like a multi-POV situation. Not that many POVs. We'll see. But it is just the way that I think, because I come from a large family. My dad, Marvin, is here. My sisters are here, theoretically. My sisters, Candace and Joy, my brother Jordan, and several of my cousins, my cousin Angie, my cousin Tiff, my cousin Antoine are here. And I just have a lot of family. My dad was the fifth of 13. My mom was the third of 4. So it's always about your position in relationship to other people. It's really hard for me because it doesn't really feel like a how. Like when people ask me, like, how do you manage all of it? Because when I think about a person, I just think about like who's gossiping about them. Like, are they aware? Like there's something about when I think about characterization, it is not just interior. It is both interior or exterior, which I feel like the mothers, one of the things that really pulled me into that book so early was like, there are these mothers who seem to know everything, right? And there's also just like a web, for better or worse, of information that is like swirling around these characters, right?
Yeah, I think I relate to what you're saying about the web, because I think it's so hard to think of characters in isolation. You have to only think about them in relationship to the people who are around them. Like I always say, I don't know who a character is until I see them in relationship with somebody else. So I think that's like what this book renders so, realistically, that you see all of those different ways that these people are growing closer, these people are growing apart, especially how that is represented over time.
And I know that you're a reality television fan. Are you a reality television fan?
Somewhat.
So I'm not as much as you. But one thing I do love about it is the confessional.
Yes.
Because the confessional is all about, like, it's how I think about character, which is all about, like, this is what this person is presenting.
Yeah.
But this is my sort of impression of it.
Right.
Obviously, it's like a contrivance, but like the performance of it is like, this is what we are thinking about when we are just like in a group, like a social web. We are thinking about these things. We're not getting like, completely done up and sitting in this little booth to talk about them. But the concept of it, like, it makes sense.
Right.
Like, that's not artificial, because they're trying to show something that is real about like social like webs.
Right.
I like what you said about the confessional, because in these relationships there are these differentials between the women around who feels comfortable to tell the truth to each other, and so much of that is predicated on these like differences of ambition and definition on what they want. What I loved about this book was that so many of these characters are allowed to be adrift, allowed to be ambivalent and not know what they want. It feels kind of like an ode to lostness in a way, and you can feel the way that changes the fabric of their relationships with each other across time.
Do you consider yourself a type A person?
Yes.
Okay. Do you consider yourself a type A person?
I guess probably leaning more that way. I clearly don't want to identify as that.
I don't want to either.
I'm fighting
but I think that people, would.
I think I would be described as such.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that, I don't know why. Oh, I think I do. I think that one of the reasons that I'm interested in people who are adrift is like a kind of practice in grace, for myself, but also for other people. That we don't have to have everything figured out. Even my first novel, the character Layla was very adrift. She was adrift in gambling addiction, but also just in life, like as the 13th child in this family. And I think that also outside of my sort of general just interest in people who do not have things figured out? Like, did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, from a pretty young age.
Yeah.
So this is one of those professions, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's not a lot like this, well, you know, but there are certain ones that people just knew very early.
Right, right.
And so I think I'm interested in imagining a life
People
where,
who don't experience that.
yes, which is the majority, I feel like, of human beings, right?
That's true.
And so I'm very interested in, and I try to do it without judgment, right? This idea that there are people who are adrift. Yeah. And then in this book, I also did try to have somebody in the character, Nakia, who is like a restaurateur. I tried to have somebody who is not adrift, right? Who like knows very early to try to have, but is still seeking things while knowing like I want to own these restaurants very early.
Right.
I think that it also is just really useful for like a narrative tension, because in a friend group, that is a point of tension.
Yes.
The person who just always knows, like even if they're just waiting tables, I was waiting tables when I was working on the Turner House, but I knew why I was waiting tables because I was working on this novel, you know? So it's like that tension with other people who might be waiting tables, and that is fine, that's what they want to do for their life, or other people who feel deeply sort of like this discomfort in it. But if you're all hanging out, that is another potential like way for people to sort of butt up against each other.
Right, right. So I know you're going to be asked this question a million times. What was the spark for this book? Was there a particular character that was like your entry point, or a particular storyline, or a particular relationship? Like, what was your first kind of inkling of this book?
So the oldest part of this book is from 2011. Which is the opening chapter, which is a chapter where the character Desiree is on a trip in Paris with her grandfather. And I wrote that at the end of being in an MFA program, or right after it. And some people try to tell me it was a short story, but I don't really write short stories for many reasons, which is funny because there's been like some reviews that are like, it's a collection of short stories. And it's like, that's interesting because I don't write short stories. But I do believe in like propulsive chapters.
Sure,
like I like my chapters to have shape, a shapeliness to them. I like to feel like they like go somewhere. But so that I just, you know, when you write a thing and then you just keep opening up that document, like looking at it. And so there were some years, like I wrote another novel, and then I was still, every once in a while, like I would change computers, but I would always make sure I had that document still. And what it became clear to me that this was like an inciting incident, that it wasn't like I was gonna make a novel about this premise, but that this was something that was gonna like change this character's life. So then my other preoccupation, which was just like I'm obsessed with my friends generally, but specifically when I was young in New York in my like late 20s and early 30s, younger, I spent all the time, all of my free time with my girlfriends. I was obsessed with them. And I was also, people would come up to us, we knew each other from like undergrad, so at that point maybe it was like 10 years, and people would be like, it's so special that you guys are still friends. And I would think about, oh, so what is on the other side of this? Like, how is this gonna continue? And so I guess the spark was probably both me just opening that document a bunch of times, but also thinking about what does friendship mean to me, and how has my thinking about it evolved, and also how does it evolve as you age?
I feel that you're talking about the longevity of friendship. This book is sprawling in the time that it covers. We move from like 2008, 2012, 2024. And in all of those periods are like real concrete cultural artifacts of the period. And I'm wondering if you could talk about what that was like, rendering each period and the friendship in those periods.
I don't know if I'm like a very nostalgic person, but I am interested in writing, or in this novel, I was very interested in writing about like right now. Right now obviously changed because it took me 10 years to write this novel. But, I was interested in thinking about what it feels like for like the sort of runway in front of you to just feel unclear. And I felt like the best way to do that was to check in on these characters at like very specific moments in time. And I don't necessarily always think that I'm having fun when I'm writing, but I had a lot of fun thinking about, like, remember when they put that pink pussy hat on Harriet Tubman in Harlem? Why did they do that? Why did they do that? Like, it was just fun and funny to think about, because it was like, I feel like now, like 10 times a day, there are moments that are like, did this really happen? Mm-hmm. But back then, they didn't happen as often, right? Now we're living completely in maybe we're living in the good place, I don't know. But we're living in a timeline where, did this really happen? It happens every day.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to also, I had to have some of those moments so that as we progress, and they sort of happen every day, that you would feel the difference as a reader. Like you would feel the way that like psychologically it has started to like mess with characters. The fact that like these things are happening all the time.
Right. I also think very deeply about friendship, because friendship is very important to me. And I feel like it's weirdly kind of underexplored when it comes to relationships, I guess, compared to sort of romantic relationships. So I was curious reading this because obviously as soon as you write about a group of friends, people are going to think about other texts about groups of friends. Were there any texts that were inspiring to you? Any that you wanted to write against? Any that you had tropes that you were like, that's irritating? When you think about any type of text across any medium about, it could be Black women, friends, groups of friends in general. I'm just curious if there's anything that either inspired you in like a positive or negative direction as you were thinking about your friends.
So I was definitely, I wouldn't say negatively inspired, but I will say that I was adamant from the outset that I did not want to write a novel where, it's about friends, but it's mostly about these friends coupling up.
Yeah.
Like, they're always talking about finding a man, like they're always, and there is a lot in culture where that is the
Think of a few
of it, and I just did not have an interest in that.
Yeah.
I've had like a couple of like early sort of interviews where people are asking me like, about the men's depiction, and I'll be honest, they're actually just not that depicted that much. And it is because this is a book about these women.
Yeah.
It is not in opposition to anybody, but it is about the love story, the like romance, the 20-year romance is among this group. It is not, some of them have beautiful romances on the side, but we don't really see a lot of them.
Right.
And that was on purpose. As far as there's just so many. I mean, Thelma and Louise. That was a DVD, a VHS tape that we had in my house growing up. And if you just would watch the same, because that's what you had. So I watched it a lot very young. But also, of course, Waiting to Exhale, and Insecure, which this book has been in the works so long that I actually was writing this book before it even aired, which is crazy to think about, because it aired and completely finished, and I was still working on this novel. I did other things in between, but it was brewing. Like the document was growing.
Right.
Girlfriends, for sure. In literature, there's Sula. I think one of the things about Sula is that the men they're sometimes huge plot devices, right? But Morrison also makes it clear, like, this is a story about these two women. And it's a story about can they ever like get back to each other? And I guess another thing, maybe if I was writing against a little bit, it was in the way that this book is not just sort of about any group of friends, but about a group of millennial friends. I was writing against what I saw about 5 years ago or so, this sort of claiming of like a kind of like prototypical millennial like woman that was not Black, and that was like having these concerns that I did not feel like had anything to do with me necessarily. And I think I was writing against that a little bit. There was, fun fact, a moment where I wanted to title this novel to be The Millennials.
I love that.
Because I wanted to just kind of stick a flag in it.
Right.
Like, no, it's not you, it's me. And I still kind of feel that way. Yes.
No, I've definitely felt that way, and that, like, when we talk about, like, the millennial femme experience, we aren't talking about Black women. And I feel like in this book, the friction they have with each other does feel outside of any concerns around partnership. When there's friction, it feels really alive because they're contending with each other's continuum of identity, right? Taking a job that is they think is outside of their friend's integrity, trying to protect them, but also the kind of weird judgment that can enter friendship when you see your friend reaching for a particular thing that you don't understand. There's so much here about, if not partnership, work, art, and trying to defend yourself around your choices in these sort of changing friendships. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about that friction that comes up.
So I have been told that I am a person who likes conflict. I don't like conflict. I actually have a friend who does own, like, I like conflict, like she likes it. But like she will like have a conversation with somebody about a parking spot. Like she's fine with it. She's fine with it. But I am not conflict averse. And I think that I believe very strongly in, like, part of being part of a community is like being open to accountability, but also like everyone can't just run away from each other. Like, people have to have conversations, and especially when you're thinking about choosing, like continuously choosing. We've talked about this, right? About like, how do I have a hard conversation with someone, right? Who I care about a lot, like a friend.
Right.
And it's because you see them, but you also are trying to understand, right? So it's not like you are always, I know that this is wrong, this thing you're doing, but it's like, I am endeavoring to understand.
Right.
And I do, we've all seen these, what do we call the Instagram posts that are just textgrams? Is that what they're called?
I don't know.
They're
Reels?
They're like, what's that?
Reels?
No, just
That's the video.
Reels are the videos. Reels are the videos they want us to make. But they don't want to make.
Just like the block of text.
The block of text, right? These are the things, I actually feel like this is the most insidious form of media on Instagram.
Okay.
Are these blocks of text, right? That just say a thing like it's like a fact or there's some expert behind it. And it's saying things sometimes that are like, what are we talking about? Like there's a whole sort of transactional relationship, like genre of these textgrams that are like, it might be the season of your life where these people can't come with you. And it is like,
The like worst person you know repost it. Like,
and I'm like, is that fall? Like what season? Like the season when you're doing what? That you have to break up with all of your friends. Like they cannot come with you to this new season of your life.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of it is about giving people permission to just behave poorly and not communicate with people. Like just abscond because things feel weird and not communicate. And I wanted to have some people who would do that. Like some of these characters, if they had their druthers, they would, but they have people in their lives, their other friends who love them that are like, hey, no, like, this is not the season of your life where you're just a mom and you don't answer anybody's text messages ever. Like that's not the season of your life. You can be busy, but also sometimes you have to answer the text message. So I just felt like if we're going to think about how do people stay for 20 years, like stay in each other's lives, there has to be conflict, and it has to look like not fist fights necessarily, I pray, but it has to look like hard conversations. Like this is what I felt like the main sort of like meat of the book is how do these people keep meeting each other over the years.
Right.
And we have that framework more for romantic relationships, what conflict looks like, what separation looks like. But in friendship, it's a hairier territory, and you do that so well in this book.
Thank you.
I was wondering also about your writing home in this book, because the book mostly takes place in New York and LA. I know that in the time in which you were writing the book, you have lived in both places. The book is so much about the changing of those cities, gentrification, these other issues. So I'm curious about the experience of writing it during that time period, living in these cities, moving between them, how you thought about it when you started writing it, how those cities changed when you finished. Like, what was that experience of writing these two homes that you've lived in while you were working on the book?
So I didn't have any intention to ever live in Los Angeles again after I graduated from college. But then in 2019, when I decided that I wanted to have a child, thought it would be good to like be near my family. So we moved back to LA, and we gave it 4.5 years. And then we moved back here. Felt like it was enough time. But one thing that I had in LA in my mind that I had not lived in since 2007, that had I not moved back, I would not have been able to write this novel, because the LA in my mind had nothing to do with the LA that I encountered in 2019. And housing crisis, like the housing crisis is a thing that's like afflicting most pockets of this country at this point. But the housing was like a real issue. There was a time where you could have a 1-bedroom in Culver City. This time was when I graduated from undergrad, for $1,000. $1,000 on the West Side. It's not a reality anymore. So when I thought I would be going back to this place, and I'd be like, it's fine, we'll just like maybe there'll be carpet, but it'll be fine. Like we'll just find like a cheap apartment on the West Side. It'll be fine. Like that's not, you're paying a lot of money for that carpet now. So moving back there, I was confronted with just the unaffordability of the city, of both cities. And then I also was just confronted with the things that I had taken for granted about like LA's huge homelessness crisis. It was just, I have had family members who've lived on Skid Row for parts of my life. Skid Row is older than me. It's older than everybody in this room. It's just, like it has a Google Map location. That's not right. But it was something I had taken for granted. That in 2025 there's a neighborhood called Skid Row, right? And it is what you might imagine. But also one thing on a more positive note, moving back to LA, particularly communicated to me, or what made clear to me, was that because it is a city that it has such vast sort of disparities, the people, like a lot of people in the city, they don't do politics, they don't talk about politics, they talk about ayahuasca or whatever. But the people who are plugged in are plugged in. They're in mutual aid groups. I mean, some of the responses that you've seen to ICE raids and things, this is because there's like a foundation already of organization, especially in like the most sort of at-risk communities. And I found that to be deeply, deeply inspiring. And also, the arts there, outside of the theatrical arts of Hollywood, nobody cares. So the people who are making things they're just doing whatever they want, because there's no guarantee they're going to get rich, but because of that, they're just really innovating and making really interesting things, and the community is very like closely knit. And then you have fiction writers, which literally nobody cares. But I found that to be also very humbling while working on this novel in a place where nobody ever asked me how this novel was going. Because it wasn't a screenplay.
Right.
That's actually a perfect way into something I wanted to talk about, which is money in this book, especially its sort of fluctuation between all of the friends. All of them have it kind of differently, and it also influences sort of their dynamics, their friction, the conflicts that come up between them, and that was also really exciting to read. What were you thinking as you were writing those dynamics?
One thing that I really admire about Luster is how broke your narrator is. Like in ways that feel very tangible, right? I'm realizing now I read a mouse on a kitchen counter scene. And you've got the like bread that's been like burrowed into by the mouse. But money is real. And I think that a lot of people talk about, fiction, like novels are historically are supposed to be for the middle class, and they're not supposed to do this and they're not supposed to do that. And that might be historically, like a century ago, who the target audience was for these books. But that I read the same books, and I did not come from that. And it never occurred to me that in my fiction, I was supposed to not talk about money, or also conversely make money, like not having money, the sole sort of character, like the sole characteristic of a person, because there's that, like that's always been in like historically in fiction. It's like a person can be broke, but that's got to be the only thing they ever think about. They can't ever have any other concerns because they got to find money. And I feel like that's not, plenty of us are broke, but we also think about a lot of other things. We just don't want to pick up the check, at the end of like the meal. So I wanted to make that something that felt present, but also one of the things when I was thinking about how are my friendships going to evolve, I also was thinking about individually, it's like this generation of person who the future that our parents in our 30s and our 40s had it's not guaranteed at all, right? How does that person, like just who's living with like precarity of a different kind, what does that do to your like brain? And what also does it do to your interactions with other people? Right. And so there are friends who are like hustling, pivoting to influencing in an effort to get money to try to figure out how to like capitalize on this moment. And then you have people who grew up with money but feel sort of because of that they need to have this bigger purpose for themselves, like to give back or to have, like it all means something. And then you have people you have a character who inherited money because of a series of tragedies, who kind of just doesn't like to think about it. Right. And then you have somebody who has a good man with money, but it's not enough. And I thought that was a good sort of diversity of relationships with money. And some of it changes throughout the book.
Right. I know we have to jump to Q&A, but let me just ask you one final question, so please think about your questions. I want to ask you about writing about the internet, and I'm asking about this selfishly because we sort of met on the internet, like we met on Twitter. Oh, yeah. Like, so we were like Twitter mutuals, and then when you were on your book tour for Turner House, and that was the first time we met in person. So you are one of the best things that ever came from me being on Twitter. I'm no longer there, but I'm so grateful that I met you. But I'm curious if you just talk about writing about the internet, again, like thinking about the evolution of social media during the duration when you were writing this book, I imagine that changed. And yeah, you have this character in the book who sort of aspires to internet fame. So could you talk about that a little bit, the experience of writing about the internet?
So there's a character named Monique who has had this one moment that she got a little bit of virality off of. She's like a trained librarian, but she decides, well, maybe I can get some more virality, and maybe I can make some money doing this. The thing about writing about the internet is that it is extremely cringe. So the hardest parts to write in this novel were every single and she has the smallest section. Yeah. Every single one of those Monique sections were very difficult because the thing that I wanted to explore is the way that if you are in the business of publicly self-narrativizing all the time, you can actually not know yourself that well. And so I tried to explore that. And I also wanted to show what it's like when you've been doing it a long time. So she's got like a blog spot kind of thing in the beginning. Yeah. And then it's mostly just posting. But then by the end, she's got a podcast. She's pivoted through the various mediums within social media and just writing on the internet. But I wanted to show the way that, have any of you ever met like a very online person and then at least the first hang, you're like, oh, she's one of those online people. Like she doesn't actually, like she's weird in person. Right. Sometimes I've learned that subsequent hangs, they'll be less weird, but sometimes they won't. But But it has to do, it's interesting because when we were on Facebook a million years ago and they were called updates, we didn't necessarily know. Now they're just posts, right? Sometimes you were just like, I just got coffee, right? Like you didn't know what you were supposed to be putting. But now everyone is self-publishing. Everyone is self-narrativizing. I was talking to someone the other day, like a dad at a play date, and he was like, yeah, I mean, I have friends of mine who don't even have a lot of followers, and they'll say things like, if you don't like my content, then. And it's like, do you have content? Or are you just like keeping in contact with your friends?
Right.
But the lines have gotten blurred.
Yeah.
And it feels like a lot of people who maybe just have like 500 followers, should they get a moment like Monique did where they get virality, they would be like leaning into it because one, quite frankly, it's a viable career path in 2025, but two, because it always seems like that is the end goal of what else are you sharing all of this for? And so I wanted to think about that, but I also wanted it to feel like as a reader, you're allowed, those of you who haven't read it, you are allowed to cringe. When you are reading Monique sections, you're supposed to. I cringed when I was writing. But it was an exercise in one, again, I'm interested in how are people living right now? And we see like over 20 years, like how is she living on the internet? And in the beginning, you can tell she doesn't think anybody's reading it, just by the way that the posture. But by the end, the posture is different. You know, she's self-referring a lot. She's perhaps trying to coin some terms. You know, like she's got like a Patreon.
Right.
And again, it's a viable way to make a living in 2025. So I'm not criticizing anybody who has all of those things, but I wanted to think about what does that mean to your IRL relationships, and she does like have arguments about this IRL with the people who've known her before that.
Yeah, thank you.
So we have questions?
Yeah, do we have time for a couple questions? Can you raise your hand high so they can hand you a mic?
Oh, it's Rashida. All right.
Hi, Angela. So nice to see you.
So nice to see you.
My question is about your writing process and what it was like. I mean, of course, I imagine that over the 10-year span you were working on other projects. I read, I think, in Lit Hub today that you're working on a memoir, and so I'm just curious, of course, you're working on other things, but I'm just curious about like how you sustain yourself and like your artistic passions and just like your faith in the project as you're sort of like grappling with the unknown, and just like moments where like, did you lose a kind of spark or faith? How did you find renewed faith and energy in the project? And how did this process, in the span of writing the second novel, differ from writing your debut novel? Like, did you learn something new or different about yourself in the process? And I'm just curious about how you sustained yourself during the 10 years.
How I survived. That is a very good question. Part of the thing that happens after you put out like a first book, if you're lucky enough for that book to like do a thing in the world, is that people give you a lot of opportunities to do stuff, including teach, which is how I met you many years ago. And all of those things are not writing. There are other things, some of them are writing. Like I wrote a show for HBO that they didn't make into a series, but they're not necessarily working on the novel, because you have much like my characters, I had a desire for some middle class stability. And so I took all these jobs. So that was, I think, one of the things that I had to kind of come to terms with, is that I just had to be a little bit broker for a little while so that I could finish this novel. I think that there's a lot of things that contributed to me finishing this book. One of them was like having a child and losing my mother when I was 8 weeks pregnant. I just thought, well, she's not going to feed this child. Like, she can't raise this child. So I have to actually finish this thing so I have money, quite frankly. But also, your time is no longer your time in the same way. So you can't fritter away the day in a way that you might before. Like, you pay any time that you're writing that isn't in the middle of the night, and you're paying that way because you're not sleeping, but is time that you have paid for childcare. So I just became a lot less precious of what it required, like the circumstances that were required to get the writing done. As far as how I kept myself sort of motivated, maybe a little bit of like rage, honestly. These past almost 2 years of genocide in Palestine is rage, but also living in LA and seeing that a lot of the, like, baked into just the fabric of the city, techno-fascism, like, even on an architectural level, just, it's not a place that like wants to let you move around freely. I often tell my students when I do teach that if you have a lot of gripes and you can't stop thinking about them, there's nothing wrong with putting them into a novel. You have to be artful, you have to figure out how to do it, but I do think that there is, in addition to this being a novel about care and community and love, it is also a novel that is like pissed off about a lot of things. And I think that, quite frankly, more, in 2025, more fiction should be pissed off about some stuff. There's a lot to be pissed off about. So those things certainly help me to finish. We have 2 hands.
Hello.
Hi, Yahya.
I wanted to ask about, I think we talked about this partly, but I wanted to ask about what was the moment when you realized you had the title?
When it was not the millennials. The title, when I sold the book, and for the longest, was The Wounded Wilderness, which is based on a Betty Saar silkscreen that she made. She moved to Laurel Canyon in like the 60s, and then there was a wildfire, and she made this painting about like the landscape and the aftermath of the wildfire. And I saw this sometime before the pandemic when I was already working on the novel. She had like 2 big retrospectives, one in LACMA in LA and one in MoMA, so I can't remember which one. But so for the longest, that was the title, was The Wounded Wilderness. I tend to go kind of gothic, like in my early titles, like the Turner House used to be called Haunting Detroit. I don't know what that's about, but I think that the wilderness without the wounded part is a little less determined and a little bit more open to interpretation. And also, like, there's more than just woundedness that's happening in the novel.
Hello. Could you tell us about the Mickalene Thomas on the cover and your relationship to that painting?
You, Miriam?
It is.
Your hair has gotten so long. So in 2021, I profiled Mickalene Thomas, and I do a lot of research for those things. So I looked at like everything she had made up to that point, like a lot of things. I hunted down all of like the various books and like catalogs and monographs. And I remember that before that, I had never seen these interiors, these like collage painting interiors she did. She's very well known for her portraiture. And when we needed a cover for the book, and I was thinking about artists that I personally know that I could call and be like, hi, I remembered these collages. So she did a bunch of interiors and she also did some landscapes. And they were both like in the early 2010s when she did these. And they're smaller, like in real life. She has, over the years, as many artists do, when they can afford, bigger studios, get bigger. But also, I know Mickalene has like a project that's like rooted in like monumentalism. I'm still a huge fan. Sometimes you profile people and you become less of a fan, but I'm still a huge Mickalene Thomas fan. So I remembered this this art. And I really was drawn to the fact that there were no people in it from a narrative perspective, because it gave the reader an opportunity to imagine themselves in the space, somebody in the space, but it wasn't concrete who was in the space. But I also liked the fact that it is a collage, because the way that the book is structured is collage-like there are things layered on top of each other. It's not linear. But you can also tell that this is a Black woman's or a very fabulous gay man's house, right? Like, it's not just anybody's house, right? There's only a few people who would live here. And I liked that. But it felt welcoming, right? It wasn't like you can't come with your shoes on. But if you take your shoes off, you can come. So I just really thought that, and also it could potentially fit all 5 of them. It's just hard to think, even though probably only 4 of them will be together at one time, but it's really hard to think about, for me, I don't like to be very literal in covers, but I do understand that potential readers, they want something that pulls them, and it felt like this is a thing that really pulls you into the book.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, Angela. Congratulations. It's Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
I wanted to hear you talk more about how you worked with location to move time, because you said it's a 20-year span, and can you talk more about that?
Sure. So the way that I write is that I just write what feels like the easiest thing to write next. I don't think about stories chronologically. I think about where the story begins, and I think about sort of where it ends, but I don't necessarily believe that the information has to be delivered in a chronological way to get there. There's a lot of different ways that you can get that shape of narrative movement, and I really like books that use more of the sort of accretion of information technique to get there versus, oh, and then this happened, and then this happened. No, it's all of these things happen, and the moment that you learn them as a reader is when you're sort of changed. And so the shape, you make the shape as you get to understanding by the end. That's not to say that the chapters occur in the novel in the order I wrote them, but when I wrote them all, same thing I kind of did with the Turner House, I just put them all out, on chapter by chapter on the floor, and I kind of play solitaire, and I move them around until they make a kind of narrative sense to me. I cheated at the end of the Turner House and just decided I would put, oh, this is week 1, this is week 2, this is week 3, but that's not exactly how I thought about the relationship between one chapter and the next. And in this one, I felt like there needed to be a prismatic approach, the way that memory works, but also a web of friendship. If I was to ask you, Nicole, your friend Ngozi, oh, what's the story of your friendship? I don't think it would just be, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Oh, you're right there, hello. It would be a web of explanation, right? And so I wanted the book to feel like that. It's not, the shape is not a line. Thank you all so much for coming.
Should we hold books up? If everybody would hold their book up if they've got it, so that Angela can take a pic.
Yes.
And you, why not?
Okay.
Woohoo.
Should I take a selfie?
Oh yeah, even better.